The way Stephen Kerr told the story in 2007, the two spent the night in the Greenwich home of Kerr's parents, and the following morning, Jaleek was gone. Stephen Kerr was interviewed by us and, of course, by investigators, but claimed the deck was stacked against him.
I'm not privy to much of the investigation because the police are still working on the assumption, partially, that I did something wrong.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Where Are They podcast. Today's episode might be one you've heard of before. We are talking about the disappearance of 12-year-old Jaliek Rainwalker. Jaleek was a foster child in the system for most of his life who had recently been adopted. He disappeared from Greenwich, New York in 2007. Jaliek Rainwalker's case should make you angry when you hear it. This is a 12-year-old boy who never really stood a chance in life. He was diagnosed special needs as soon as he was born to a drug-addicted mother on the kitchen floor in an Albany, New York house. He was placed into the foster care system just 2 days later in the state of New York. For the first 7 years of Jaleek's life, he bounced around to 6 different foster care families. Jaleek had some developmental delays and some behavior issues, and he required a therapeutic foster home. A therapeutic foster home is one in which the caregivers are supposed to have specific training to care for a special needs child. Jaleek was born addicted to cocaine and just received a really rough start in life. So in Jaleek's 6th foster home, he was able to remain there for 4 years, from 1998 until 2002. This family had started the process to adopt him, but some incident in the home caused them to change their minds. I'm not exactly sure what that incident was, but Jaleek once again was placed into yet another foster home. I want to mention that everyone who cared for Jaleek did indeed say he was a handful of a child. He had attachment disorders, which caused a lot of confusion and anger in him. He was prone to temper tantrums and outbursts. But everyone said he was also a sweet and likable kid with a beaming smile. He clearly was born at a disadvantage in life and needed help, and it just seems like he couldn't find the help and stability he needed. His 7th foster home would be in the care of Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald, beginning in 2002. Jaleek was 7 years old. Stephen and Jocelyn had 3 biological sons and an adopted daughter already when they brought Jaleek into the home. Their adopted daughter had also come through the therapeutic foster care system, and all the children in the house would now range from age 7 to 14. Interestingly, the family that had cared for Jaleek prior had reservations about him going to the Kerr-McDonald home. They lived in a very rural part of Washington County, New York, and they had a 2-room cabin with no running water. They used an outhouse for a bathroom, and all 7 people living in the home slept in one room. They did have a generator for electricity, but they only ran it for 2 hours each day. The children were all homeschooled and all in all lived a very non-traditional life. In 2004, the family officially adopted Jaleek. However, because he, and along with the daughter they adopted, were special needs through the state, they continued to collect $1,500 a month for each of them in their care. In 2007, Jaleek ended up threatening a child in their homeschooling group. Again, I don't know the particulars of this, but it did cause a lot of concern with the family. There was also some concern from Jocelyn and Stephen that Jaleek was going to harm one of their other children. So in October of 2007, Stephen called Family Services. It was actually a crisis hotline set up for adoptive families. He stated that he wanted to reverse the adoption and have Jaleek removed from his home. Family Services told him that was not possible and they couldn't do that. They did, however, suggest that he utilize respite care. So respite care is set up for caregivers who need a break, and also the person that they're caring for can receive a break, and they can go stay with another caregiver for an agreed upon amount of time. So Jaleek went into respite care on October 24th for 1 week. The woman caring for him, I believe, had been one of his previous caregivers, so knew him. And she was able to care for him from October 24th to November 1st. Stephen had set up a second week of respite care beginning on November 2nd. However, they were going to have to pick Jaleek up on November 1st and keep him for just one night before he could go to his next home. Stephen stated he didn't want to bring Jaleek back to their home since his family was afraid of him. So he took Jaleek to his dad's house in nearby Greenwich, New York. I know some of you may be thinking I'm pronouncing Greenwich wrong. However, all of the locals state that it is pronounced Greenwich, and Greenwich, New York is actually the village closer to Manhattan. So when I'm talking about Greenwich, New York, I'm a little bit further upstate near Washington County. So Stephen picks up Jaleek from his respite care home and takes him out to dinner at Red Robin. At 8 p.m., they were both confirmed to be eating dinner at a local Red Robin restaurant, and both a waitress and the restaurant manager confirmed seeing them there. After that, what we know of the timeline with Jaleek comes directly from Stephen Kerr himself. After eating dinner, they drove back to Stephen's dad's house. His dad was out of town, and Stephen said they both went to bed shortly after they got home from dinner. And when Stephen woke up around 7:30 on the morning of November 2nd, he glanced over to see Jaleek still in bed, or so he thought. But when he walked over to the bed to check on Jaleek further, he realized the bed was just stuffed with pillows and blankets to make it look like he was in bed, but he was not there. So Stephen apparently does what most people would do when they wake up and realize their special needs child is missing. He took a shower, and then he drove into town to return some videos. I mean, if that doesn't raise a big question mark, I'm not sure what would. It does seem right off the bat like odd behavior. So he returns to the house after dropping off these videos, and Jaleek still isn't there. So it was 8:57 a.m. when Stephen called the police to report Jaleek missing. So what really sticks out to me as being odd with that, besides pretty much all of it, is that Stephen and Jocelyn claim to be afraid of Jaleek and afraid for their family. So if this is the case, shouldn't they be even more worried about his whereabouts if he left the home? If they thought he was dangerous, you think that would kind of have invoked some kind of panic in Stephen in looking for Jaleek. Stephen tells police that he believes Jaleek ran away because when he couldn't find Jaleek in the house, he did a quick walkthrough and looked around and noticed that his duffel bag and his favorite stuffed animal were both missing. He described Jaleek as wearing a bright yellow fleece hoodie, and he also provided authorities with a note that Jaleek wrote, which in Stephen's mind indicated that he ran away. So in Jaleek's things, Stephen had found this note, and the note read, "Dear everybody, I'm sorry for everything. I won't be a bother anymore. Goodbye, Jaleek." It would come to light, however, from Jaleek's respite caregiver, the woman who had Jaleek the week prior, that Jaleek wrote that note in her care because he said he wanted to apologize to his family for his behavior. It was not about running away. But Stephen and Jocelyn continue to believe that Jaleek ran away. After a few days, they also suggest to police that maybe he was suicidal due to the problems that he was having getting along with others. Maybe that's why he signed the note goodbye. They also suggested to police that he might have joined a gang. So police pretty quickly began to doubt Stephen's story. And I also want to mention here that the police really came out for this kid. The investigation began right away. They conducted a ton of interviews and searches. Right off the bat, a team of detectives and police went on a physical search of the area, the woods, the neighborhoods. They came out in droves. There was also a team of investigators that stayed back to continue to question Stephen and Jocelyn and the people that knew them. So we're always quick to point out when police work is inadequate. However, this town really seemed to care, and the police seemed to go above and beyond right away. In fact, to this day, they continue to work this case as if it just happened. They are not giving up on Jaleek. Many of the townspeople continue to praise the police work that was done on this case. The police conduct a search on the house in Greenwich, Stephen's dad's house, which is allegedly the last place Jaleek was known to be, according to Stephen. And they actually find Jaleek's duffel bag and stuffed animal that Stephen had said Jaleek took with him. They found both items stashed in the corner of the garage of the home. By January of 2008, Stephen Kerr was the official person of interest in the case. They did polygraph Jocelyn McDonald, and the results were inconclusive. Stephen refused a polygraph, and I know this always looks bad when someone refuses to take a lie detector test, but they are so unreliable. I really don't think it's that unusual. A lot of lawyers will advise against it. And also, supposedly, Stephen had agreed to take one. But after Jocelyn took hers, she was so upset with the questions that she was asked, Stephen changed his mind. Also, Stephen and Jocelyn began to really push the theory that Jaleek had ran away and possibly to join a gang. And their reasoning for this was because Jaleek was biracial and they lived in a predominantly Caucasian town, that Jaleek wanted to experience the other part of his culture. And I'm not sure why joining a gang had to be the way to do that in Stephen and Jocelyn's mind. So if that's not completely racist, I'm not sure what is. But whether Stephen is racist or not isn't the issue here. A couple months after the disappearance, Stephen says he received an anonymous letter, possibly from Jaleek. This letter is very unusual. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but it references some personal things about Jaleek. I'm just going to read the letter here so you can see what I mean. Jaleek, still alive, needed a foot soldier for this war on drugs. Picked him up at Route 40, Post 30. He's okay, no fake. He says, asks his mama and papa, who are the Macaroni family? My cat named Diamond. Why does Franti yell fire? Don't try to look, we are not there. So this letter apparently showed up at the home of Stephen and Jocelyn, and they did turn it into the police. The police tried to make sense of what these references in the letter mean. Diamond was the name of Jaleek's cat, so there was a connection there. Franti Yells Fire is a reference to a song, but police aren't sure the connection or the meanings with some of the other items in this letter. Police believe that Stephen himself might have written this using the computer at his dad's house. So they quickly confiscated that along with the printer, but they were actually unable to confirm if it was used to write and print the letter. 4 months after Jaleek went missing, Stephen and Jocelyn pack up and leave Washington County, moving across state lines and into Vermont. They have refused to help investigators, and they have not called to check in on the investigation one time since moving. They claim they still believe Jaleek is alive and out there somewhere. But my question is, only 4 months later, why would you leave the home that Jaleek would know to return to if that is indeed the case? So even with Stephen and Jocelyn in another state, the police continue to investigate. Police never let up. They dig into Stephen's story a little more and pull his cell phone records. On midnight, the night of November 1st, Stephen's phone pinged on a cell tower near an industrial part of town, which is also close to the Hudson River. This is nowhere near the home where he said he had been sleeping at that time. Remember, he said when they returned home from dinner at Red Robin, shortly after 8 p.m., they went straight to bed. So at midnight, his phone pings on this tower. They were able to find some surveillance footage in that area, and they do find a similar van to Stephen's driving down Main Street near that area where the phone had pinged, or heading towards that area. But the footage is so dark and grainy, you can't even confirm it was Stephen's van, or even if it was Stephen driving. You can't see the license plate. You can't see inside the van at all. So at best guess, it is possibly Stephen's van. Of course, with all of this circumstantial evidence coming to light, the public fully believes Stephen had something to do with Jaleek's disappearance. And I'll definitely admit it doesn't look good. Barbara, Jocelyn's mother and Jaleek's grandmother, does some interviews and prays for Jaleek's safe return. After a while, however, she comes forward to say that she also believes Stephen did something to Jaleek and that her daughter is helping cover it up. Barbara even petitioned the court to obtain custody of Jaleek should he return, but apparently it was not granted, which is kind of baffling in my opinion. Seems like a no-brainer to get Jaleek into someone else's care after everything that came to light, but I also don't know the specifics of that particular custody case. Shortly after Stephen and Jocelyn move out of their cabin in Washington County, Barbara breaks into the home and takes a flashlight. She wants to look for clues on Jaleek's whereabouts or get some kind of an idea of what was happening in that home. And what she found would put a knot in her stomach. In Jaleek's corner of the room, remember they all shared one room, and apparently each had a little area of their own in this room. So Jaleek had a corner. She finds his corner, and right there in plain view sat his yellow fleece sweatshirt, the same one that was on all of the missing persons descriptions, flyers, posters, billboards, and the same one that Stephen claimed Jaleek was wearing when he disappeared. So Barbara's first reaction was they've been looking for a boy all of this time in a bright yellow hoodie, but actually he was wearing something else. So her first thought was the description was wrong. We've been looking for all of the wrong signs, and wonders if they could have missed something because they were looking for a boy wearing a yellow hoodie. But her second reaction was that Jaleek had most likely met with foul play and Stephen and Jocelyn had something to do with it. Why else would they lie and keep up the charade with this yellow hoodie and hide it in the house? Barbara ends up taking the yellow hoodie and turning it into police. And in doing so, she was charged with burglary for breaking and entering into the home, which I'm certain she could care less about. The police did take that evidence, however, and make it known to the public that they had the yellow hoodie and they had found it in the home. So Barbara has done many interviews and continues to search for her grandson, hoping and praying for answers to the media for her grandson. She said she just wants to hold him again and tell him that she loves him. She had publicly stated that her daughter and son-in-law were fostering for the money. They collected $36,000 a year for their two special needs children. She also stated that she had witnessed Stephen dragging Jaleek one time to the river to dunk him as a form of punishment. And one time she knew that he had been punished, and his punishment was he was not allowed to use the outhouse. So the dynamics between Stephen and Jocelyn in the home seemed very weird. Barbara said Jocelyn kicked Stephen out multiple times for being violent towards the children. And one time, when he had been violent towards Jaleek, Jocelyn made Stephen write an apology letter to Jaleek, and then he had to do Jaleek's chores for a week. Does anyone else find that super weird? Poor Jaleek never really had a chance at life at all. Barbara did call Jocelyn once to let her know that her grandmother had passed away. Jocelyn ended up filing stalking charges against Barbara for calling her. The two no longer have any contact at all. In the years that have followed, there have been multiple sightings of Jaleek out there. All have turned out to be false leads. There was a boy seen in Albany that resembled Jaleek a lot, and he was approached. They did confirm that he was not Jaliek Rainwalker. The same boy continued to be stopped multiple times with people believing he was Jaleek. This boy was asked to carry a piece of paper from law enforcement stating that he was not Jaliek Rainwalker. And the question of Jaleek's biological family comes up often too. His mother now resides in Florida, from what I can tell, has been exceptionally helpful to law enforcement. She offered her DNA right away, and she said she will do whatever she can to help. Police have said that she has been super cooperative and is resemblance of the Judgment of Solomon story in the Hebrew Bible, where the real mother is identified because of her compassion to the child. There are a few theories in this case, although one rings more obvious than the others. The first theory, did Jaleek run away? Not very likely, as all of his belongings were left behind, the same ones that Stephen said he took with him, the duffel bag and the stuffed animal. Also, where would he go? He was not well versed in the world, especially the way he lived. They lived without water and electricity most of the time. I'm sure he had little to no internet access or even ways to contact other people. If he did run away, I'm not sure he would have gotten very far, or if he had ended up in the wilderness of New York, that he would have even been able to survive that on his own. Theory number 2 is really a theory that we just hear from Stephen and Jocelyn, and that's that Jaleek joined a gang. I honestly just can't even bring myself to consider that this one is even a possibility, but Stephen and Jocelyn insist that it is. The next theory is suicide. He did have a rough life. Maybe he was just tired of it, even at 12 years old. He had a tough 12 years. All that bouncing around, what sounds like possible abuse that he endured. But how does a 12-year-old commit suicide and hide his body? Stephen and Jocelyn also reference the letter that he wrote, which he signed goodbye, as a possible connection to maybe him committing suicide. But I don't think that necessarily does. He was a 12-year-old special needs boy. I think that was just him signing off on the letter, and possibly that they're reading more into that than there is. So the last theory is that Jaleek met with foul play at the hands of Stephen Kerr and possibly Jocelyn McDonald. Honestly, this is what everyone believes, including the police. They are waiting for that last piece of evidence that would allow them to put closure on this case. There's so much circumstantial evidence here. I'm actually kind of surprised they haven't been charged yet. But I do believe we may see something develop here in the future, especially with the dedication of the police and the public to see this case solved. Now, there's a couple more interesting facts in this case. No one is quite certain why, but Stephen and Jocelyn adopted Jaleek and their daughter from the foster care system and changed their last name to Rainwalker. Jaleek was also not receiving any medical care for his disabilities. He was not in counseling. He wasn't getting any professional help at all that he really needed. The foster families that cared for Jaleek previously, along with community members and even complete strangers, have paid for billboards, participated in searches, and hung up missing posters, while Stephen and Jocelyn have done none of those things. I also think it's interesting that Stephen and Jocelyn lived such a non-traditional lifestyle, yet they had to have the training and be monitored to be a therapeutic foster home. Did they fool Children and Family Services? Or is their lifestyle, which is one without running water, 7 people in a 2-room cabin, is that acceptable for foster care in New York? I can't help but wonder if this case should shine light on that system and how they likely played a role in the failing of little Jaliek Rainwalker. So what do you think happened to poor Jaleek? Do you believe, as many do, that Stephen Kerr is responsible? Do you think that Jaleek may still come home one day? Is he still alive? And what, if any, role does Jocelyn play in this? If you have any information as to Jaleek's whereabouts, please call the Greenwich Village Police Department at 518-692-9332. There are a few Facebook pages and groups dedicated to Jaleek as well. I encourage you to seek them out and just help share any information that they have on there. They do post regular updates. Please share Jaleek's story. Help us keep his name out there. Yet another case that seems so solvable with just one more piece of the puzzle. Thank you all for tuning into today's episode. Be sure you are following us on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us under the Where Are They podcast. We will be sharing case updates as we receive them. You can also send us a message there, or you can email us at canwefindthem@gmail.com. We welcome any case suggestions that you might have, or any tips that you want to send on to us. We will forward them to the appropriate person. We will see you next Wednesday, and until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.